which is lock them up and throw away the key, do nothing, or lock them up and throw away the key, is often makes it hard for victims to report, makes it hard for them to survive beyond this incarceration. And so what are those, I mean, what are those alternative models, and are they working?
Well, before I talk about the specifics of the models, I do want to say that what brought me to that place of even wanting to explore kind of alternatives to the traditional systems that be has a lot to do with my personal history, as I explained, but also I grew up partly in Israel, and then started when I was in university originally there, which is why I was an ADA here at Smith. I started to explore kind of what was happening with Israel and Palestine, and started, I came from this very ideological growing up around, we as Jews were victimized and we're victims, and we're perennial victims, and we have to do everything we can to stay safe, and that might mean oppressing other people and doing these things. And so it just started to play with my whole conceptualization of what it means to be victimized and what places it takes us that are not always useful, and that end up giving us this, besieged mentality of victimhood. And I think the criminal justice system that we use really exacerbates that sometimes, so that there's, the victim and the offender, and never the twain shall meet, and it's an embattled relationship, and I just felt like there has to be another way, because it doesn't work, and it's not healing. We haven't even used that word today, and I think when we talk about sexual violence, we have to think about, the victim needs to heal, the people surrounding the victim need to heal, all the people in the victim's family, and the person who has perpetrated the harm needs some healing too. Yes, needs to be held accountable, but needs to heal as well. So I kind of started looking for alternatives to the criminal justice system, and came across restorative justice and transformative justice as two alternatives to the criminal justice system. What's interesting is, for the first few years that I was going to conferences at the beginning of the 2000s for practitioners of restorative justice, everybody would kind of give these presentations and say, talk about how it's being used practically on a practical level, but people would almost always say, the one place where we don't use restorative justice is in situations of sexual violence, because that's one place that they were working with restorative justice with people who had murdered people, but weren't touching it around sexual violence, because there's this particular thing around sexual violence that it's the worst thing possible, and it's the perpetrators of it are completely incorrigible. And so it was just really interesting to me. And so I started more and more at these conferences to talk about why actually restorative justice is a perfect application for something like sexual violence that is such an intimate form of interpersonal harm. And essentially, at this point, we have, in the United States and Canada is way far ahead of us, because it's taken a lot of indigenous cultural concepts from First Nations in Canada that are very kind of restorative justice based, and they're actually starting to integrate them into the mainstream criminal justice system in Canada. Here in the U.S., we have some programs that are designed to respond to sexual violence. They're just at their beginning stages. Most of that, there are really 3 programs in the entirety of North America that use restorative justice in response to sexual violence. One is called Communities of Support and Accountability. And it's specifically used with high-risk sex offenders who are returning to communities, and it involves community this is a whole topic in and of itself, and I wish we had time to talk about it, because I can tell you I know all of these programs quite well. There's another program in Canada based in Ontario that is called Creative Community. Why am I blanking out here? Sorry. My brain's kind of fried at this point. CSI, Community Something Initiative. Anyway, they work with offenders and with survivors, and do this very particular kind of mediated reintegration of offenders and support for, in conjunction with the work they do with offenders, with the survivors. And then there is an organization in the Bay Area called Generation 5 that is, over the last several years, has been exploring work with communities, mainly communities of color and immigrant communities, in exploring with them what they feel like they need to respond to situations of sexual violence internally, and how to support, again, the victim, the perpetrator, and all the people that surround them to resolve issues and to help people heal. So those are 3 programs. And there are a couple other things that are bubbling up. There's also in the Bay Area a group called Creative Solutions, and they're working now to look with communities at developing their own restorative justice-based programs to respond to sexual and domestic violence. So it's just kind of starting, I'd say the last 3-4 years, we're starting to see a little bit of an upsurge. And there are a lot of problems, none of them, of course, there's a 4th one that's the longest standing one, I don't know why I forgot it, in Canada as well, in a First Nation called Hollow Water. And it's a community of just 3,000 people, but for over 15 years they've been doing something they called Community Holistic Circle Healing, CHCH. And they have actually not only reduced reoffense of sex offense, this is the only program that's been longitudinally evaluated, but they've also reduced first-time perpetration of sex offenses by 50%. So that's a hugely successful program that's very specific to this small community. It's not necessarily a transferable program to other communities, but it has a lot of elements of programs that I think other programs are starting to kind of pull from. So that's just the very beginnings of a very big topic around restorative and transformative justice.
Because something I see connecting this reproductive justice and the violence is this sort of zero-sum framing. You know, whether it's you're a perpetrator, you go to jail, or you know, you have an abortion, you go to jail, or you know, the demonization of people and the failure to look at the context, to say, well, a woman is making a reproductive decision in a broader context. No, that's not, you know, all these people that are opposing reproductive rights, they're about, there's a line in the sand, and it's right or it's wrong, or, you know, and not seeing that there's this context, all these issues that, I mean, women get to that point of making that choice because of an entire context. And I feel like so much of the way we as a society deal with problems is very much in this sort of, as we said, black and white, zero-sum game way of dealing with it. And that's not a healing approach. That's not a sustainable approach. It's a punitive approach. And it's not solving the problems, and it's not empowering women.
So I have kind of a 2-part question. I have an opportunity in a month to be teaching a workshop to a group of students at my old high school about healthy relationships and consent and sexual violence. And I'm wondering how, like, if you guys have any advice about talking to young people about these issues, especially, I think this is like the second part, especially for Lisa, about how to talk about perpetrators, because I feel like there's such a demonization of people who are like the violent or the abusive part of a relationship, and that many people may not know like how to react to an abusive relationship because of that demonization. Like, oh, well, he isn't like what's been described to me as an abuser because he doesn't mean to be doing it, or he doesn't really know what a healthy relationship is. And I think there's such an idea of like the abuser as somebody who's on purpose manipulative, that it's hard to discuss what a healthy relationship looks like with those ideas out there.
Well, I just want to first kind of bolster that last piece that you said. I think that we have a really interesting phenomenon, especially with the media in the United States, that situations, the only times that we hear about sexual violence, they're extraordinarily sensationalized. They're the worst cases of, serial rapists, kidnappers, and the word, it's really interesting, when I worked at this organization that worked on child sexual abuse prevention, we had a media reporter call, and he wanted to write a different kind of story about sex offenders. And he said, it's so weird because I looked in all the databases that we use as reporters, and I would type in sex offender, and I got some stories, but then I thought, oh, I know why I can't find all the stories. And he typed in the term monster, and he got literally thousands of stories about sex offenders. And so I think we're doing a disservice, exactly along the lines of what you're saying, to our ability as a society to prevent sexual violence if we paint this picture. There's this, common notion that sex offenders are these, horrible monsters, when in fact, according to the statistics, the vast proportion of them are actually the people we know and love in our families, trusted coaches, all of those people. And so we're not looking in the places that we need to look to protect and to prevent, if we're just looking for those scary, serial rapist killers. And I think that's really true when you're talking about teenagers and situations of date rape and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not an expert in that kind of prevention, so I can't really speak to it, but I have tons of contacts and resources. You don't have to recreate the wheel. There is a lot of material available and a lot of really good training around healthy sexuality, as we talked about this morning, but also very specific to looking for the development of risk factors for perpetrative behavior and things like that. So I can put you in touch with all kinds of kind of world experts on that kind of thing, and then also just materials.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question kind of coming from personal experience. I was a volunteer with an organization in Massachusetts, and more specifically in a battered women's shelter. I worked with the children there. And just with talking with the kids and interacting with them on a very personal level, I feel like a lot of the time they're being left out of the equation of recovery. And I'm wondering if, and speakers from this morning, you can answer as well, if you think, due to the lack of resources kids have growing up in these environments, if that actually perpetuates domestic violence when they get older. And if so, what can be done or what's being done to help that?
I don't know if it perpetuates domestic violence. I can say with some degree of certainty it perpetuates those children getting involved in relationships where they're abused. Like that I've seen again and again and again. And it's one of those, that's what they know, that's what they've seen, and that is their normal. And so I'm not sure if it's something they seek out or if it's just that they're more vulnerable to it, or they accept it because they think it is normal, and that is their what their frame of reference is. But and I don't know about the stats on that, but we've seen that with some degree of consistency, and so it is continued sort of victimization of those kids, while they certainly in certain instances maybe they are becoming abusers as well. And I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it does set them up often to get involved in abusive relationships and situations, and just perpetuates that cycle.
About the U.S. Attorney General Holder, his pet project is, I'm blanking out on the name because I'm blanking out on everything now. What is it called?
Project Safe Childhood?
It's not Safe Childhood, it's something else. Anyway, if you look actually on the U.S. Department of Justice website for something childhood, Safe Childhood, I think it's called.
Yeah,
it's his pet project that he created when he became the Attorney General, and it looks exactly at children's exposure to all forms of violence, but there are massive, studies and statistics and all of the information about that in fact shows what Kate's talking about. But it's just one concentrated place where you can find all of that information. What is it called? Safe.
I just want to add, it's not only about exposure to violence, it's the resources those kids need to have stable lives, which is often neglected.
I have a really quick announcement. I know I've talked a lot, so I'll stop. But this is, okay. Probably you've heard about the Amherst College incidents that have been going on with rape culture and mental health culture, and all of these things. I have some good friends that go there or just graduated from there, and we're trying to unite all 5 colleges and everyone in the valley around ending this culture of rape and trying to perpetuate a culture of consent. And so we started a group called the ARE, which is the Alliance for the Respect of Every Body. And we are just like literally a week and a half ago named it. So it's a really new thing, and Kate said, you know, this is very lonely work and hard work, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, and I think that community is really necessary for survival. So we're trying to create that in the Valley, and 3 main goals right now are creating safe spaces for students off campus so that they don't have to go to their administration if they feel like they'll be targeted or blamed for their assaults, and then education around rape culture, and then also consent culture in opposition to it to try to do preventative work, and then policy reform on campuses, and also hopefully eventually this will be a national thing. Started a week ago, so like contact me. I made some pretend business cards and we can work together. Thanks.
Why don't we have a sign-up sheet out front if anybody wants to sign up, put their email, and then maybe get more information from you about that.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, I've done a lot of work and research with domestic violence. I'm currently a studies student. I'm working with TBI, adults and troubled children, but I'm also interning with the VOCA program and actually interviewing with, this week, to be a co-facilitator in an offenders program for male offenders. You were talking, Lisa? Yes, Lisa. About you do court-ordered with women and the men. How do you handle the differences there, and what do you see as the differences and what have you?
The primary differences are that in the groups with men, like I said, they are much less likely to take responsibility. They're much more likely to say, I'm a victim, I've been hurt. And once they go through the process, are able to identify that, yes, what they did was effective at attaining and maintaining that long-term power and control. And our program is over a year-long program, and so we get to know them real well. And but also that piece that Elisa's talking about, the compassion piece, it has taught me a tremendous amount of compassion. And my work with the men, quite honestly, has developed more because I'm the mother of 3 sons. And in the middle of each one of those circles, when I'm working with the men, who I see are the survivors, are the women they've hurt. That's who I'm there to serve. And as compassionate and thoughtful, but also firm as I can be in that circle, I'm helping the women inside the circle, and I'm also informing my balanced perspective as a feminist and a mother. And yes.
Does the group you do look at some of the root causes of the social interpretation of masculinity?
Oh, absolutely. It's all founded from a feminist perspective, that men abuse because they can. And if you're interested in, it's called the ADA program. And it's, that we have an accountability workbook that is on our website. The website is CSS, and then it's Washtenaw, WASHTENAW.org/ADA. And it's a tremendously intensive process that they go through, not only of the sessions, but of the mentoring and all the different pieces that we have.